Okay, welcome to the show. I am so excited about my guest that I just couldn't even press play fast enough on the record. I just want to introduce everybody to Paul Can, who I have been introduced to by a dear friend of mine, and I don't even know how I got this lucky to have him on the show, but it's the universe working for us. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And he has a great radio voice, which I'm really excited about. So, so Paul is a leadership coach and a change management expert, and he's going to talk a little bit about leaving the corporate world, and I guess leaving some other things behind in terms of old stories, old ideas. And he just so happens to also be a trans male, which makes that an interesting part of our story, but certainly not the most interesting part. So I'm really excited to welcome Paul to the show. And I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about what you're up to, and I'm just very honored that you have me as a part of this project that you're creating, and this is really going to create a massive impact for a lot of people. So thank you for having me.
Oh man, thank you. I mean, this is such an important topic on all of the things we're going to talk about today: uncomfortable conversations, shame and stigma, all of that. But really, what I want to make sure that we get out of this particular podcast is stories of hope, stories of triumph, stories of strength, courage, not being a victim, just kind of rising from the ashes, coming out of the rabbit hole, right? Which is so in line with where my heart is and how I feel about my own journey, personal journey, and my son's journey, which is why I feel like this is such a perfect match, you and I. And I'm so excited. I'm excited to help you with, kind of getting the word out with your own business, which is very exciting. But I'm also thrilled to be able to be a part of sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you. I'm
So,
I'm really excited. Like I was telling you, I'm still a little bit in the honeymoon phase around sharing my story. So
I know.
this is probably one of the second really public platforms that I'm been
Is
on,
that
and
right?
sharing my story. So I'm really excited about it, and to really be able to hopefully empower and inspire others that are in the same shoes as me, or have I think all of us have, in a way, at some certain parts of our lives, felt like we were in the closet of
Mm-hmm.
inauthenticity in some
Yep.
way, around something that we had shame or, in our lives, or judgment on. And, this is, like you said, hopefully a space where we can create hope, and not just hope, but really inspire possibility in our listeners.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a great segue to all of this. So let's start a little bit about talking about your journey and how you got to where you are, because I think it's important to describe to people that you fell into this positive type of work that you do, not by chance. I think a lot of it
Mm-hmm.
has to do with the struggles that you went through and looking at the brighter side of how you could overcome and I guess inspire. So maybe talk a little bit about how it all kind of started for you, and then I'm going to, of course, ask questions in between that are going to kind of bring us full circle to the whole piece of why we're doing this podcast together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. So 11 years ago, I came out as a transgender man, and I went right back into the closet as soon as I came out, because I was told by people that I love, by people around me, that no one would ever love someone like you. No one would ever accept someone like you. And I honestly, truly believed them. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I thought, no one would ever love someone like you. I was in a relationship actually at the time, and I thought, this is as good as it gets. I get to count my lucky stars that anyone would even decide to love me. And I remember the conversation that I had with one of my cousins, and he asked me, what are you going to do when you guys break up? And I'm like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. And he said, no. What would happen? I'm like, well, I guess, this is still who I'm going to be. And I guess I'll just have to live my life alone. And I truly, truly believe that. And when I had, came out, and when I was kind of like on that journey to becoming Paul, I had met my wife, and she accepted me for everything that I was. And that made me even more terrified, because when I realized that I could have this life with her, a life that I honestly, as a small child, could only have dreamed of, all
Hmm.
of a sudden I was terrified to lose it all. Because even though I had, transitioned, that I noticed whenever people found out about who I was before, they treated me very differently.
Mm.
The way they looked at me was different. The way they would refer to me would be different, and I would just not be treated like any other guy. So I worked so hard to just become me, so that my label wouldn't be the first thing that preceded me in the room. And because of that, I was so terrified of losing it all the time. And literally for 10 years, I was so ashamed of myself. I was so ashamed of myself that I couldn't even say the words transgendered for 10 years. It couldn't come out of my mouth, because for many years of my life, even though I had come out and my family had very much eventually accepted me, there
Hmm.
was a whole period of time where I was not, introduced in public. There was a lot of shame around it. Whenever I go into
Mm.
restaurants, literally my girlfriend at the time would be introduced as my parents' daughter, and I would be the boyfriend. And I would be like, oh, okay, well, it makes sense. It's a really awkward
Oh,
situation.
wow.
But what I didn't realize was the shame that had built up in my head around, who I am, is someone to be hidden. Who I
Hmm.
am is someone not to be proud of, and who I am is someone that, is brings a lot of shame to the family. So it wasn't until um, last year where I decided I can't keep living like this, because I just felt suffocated. Like my
Yeah.
world had become gray. I had become very, very successful in my work, but at the same time, I realized there was no joy in it, because at the very core of it, I didn't love myself. And I couldn't love others in return either. It was creating, it almost broke my marriage apart, because my wife was like, you're not loving me in the way that I want you to. And I didn't understand. I'm like, I feel like I'm doing all the things, but it's because at
Hmm.
the core of it, I didn't realize I put up so many walls in my life to protect myself from other people, that I had failed to be able to receive the love of others, and in turn be able to give love in return. And so when I went in and I finally went to do the work to break down all the walls, I realized that deep inside me was just someone that truly wanted to be loved, truly wanted to be accepted, wanted to be enough. And when I saw myself as enough, as worthy, as someone that was powerful, then I realized that by me standing in my power and be authentically me, I gave others around me permission to do so themselves. Those that felt like they didn't have a voice, to also uplift them to their highest self. And so it's been this entire journey, to finally, about a couple of weeks ago, when I finally made the decision that I get to publicly come out, because there was just one of those things, those callings that kept nudging at me and just wouldn't
Yes.
go away, because in my work as an authenticity coach, that I couldn't take off without me fully being authentically myself, ironically. And
Well,
so
I want to
yeah.
ask you this. So, because it's so exciting, literally 2 weeks ago or a week
Hmm.
ago, right?
Hmm.
To
Yeah,
today
yeah, a
is
couple.
when you,
Yeah, yeah.
okay. So, how did you do that? Let's talk about it. When you say, I finally, I did this, I decided to come out, because you obviously you already had
Hmm.
come out to, family, friends, everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
The next step is work, your professional
Hmm.
world, very scary. So, how did you do that? You just are talking
Yeah.
about it now, or just kind of give me an idea
You know
how it,
what? I put out. I wanted to do it in a way where it felt authentic to me.
okay.
It felt like it was something that I was able to fully represent my journey and where I came from to get to where I was now. And I was gonna make this like grand video and everything like that, inspired by Eugene Lee and the Try Guys doing this big coming out video, but it didn't. Nothing would come to me. I just couldn't come up with anything, and I literally sat down the night before. I decided to come out on the 21st. of July.
Why? Tell me
Wasn't
why.
necessarily
Is there a day?
planned up until that point. The
Mm-hmm.
2021 is my number. It's like always been my number. It's been a special number for me. It's always been my jersey number when I played basketball. And I'm like, my friend just asked me, she's like, when are you going to do this? You keep talking about this, but like when? And I was like, what, I'll come out by the 21st. And so I sat down literally the night before, and I had made that declaration only a couple weeks ago. Before that, I'd started making the journey towards that. And I was so terrified of what people were going to think, of losing family members, of everything like that. I was literally just shivering with fear. I was so terrified to go back to that dark place where the way that people would look at you would be from, like with judgment before they even look deeper inside. And so, I just sat there and I just started writing, and it was like this download that came to me to just share my story about where I came from, and deciding in that moment that today is the day I choose to be free. And so I wrote the post online, and there was just this flood of support that I did not expect. People
Were
that I
people
had
shocked?
people just were just like, I just didn't know this about you. And if anything,
Yeah.
people, the overall sentiment that I received, and it was people from all aspects of my life, from my childhood all the way to now, from all different communities I've been a part of, my elementary school to my church to everything like that. People that were just expressing their support and just acknowledging how it took courage and such strength and vulnerability and authenticity to be able to put something out there this bold. And the moment I pressed post, I bawled my eyes out for about
I
half
would
an hour
imagine.
with my wife.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the weight I've been carrying around on my shoulders, for 29 years of my life, that I didn't even realize have been weighing me down and suffocating me because of the secret that I kept as an invisible prison that I was held within. And so the moment I pressed post, even before anyone said anything, it was like this weight was released from my shoulders, and this floodgate of just emotions of being able to finally feel this peace and this freedom that I get to just be me.
And then the very next day, or 2 days later, you get a call from my friend Tony.
Yeah, I was
It
like,
says,
it was
hey.
this Facebook message. It's like, hey, my friend Miranda was like, hey, meet Tony. She's doing this amazing podcast with her friend, and love you to meet. I was like, okay, all right. I guess this is like, what's going to look like as I start sharing my story, and it's going to start expanding from there.
Be careful what you ask for, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing we were just talking about.
Yeah.
So you had not come out in that way, but you had come out to your family.
Yes.
And to your, okay.
Yeah.
So let's back up just a little tiny bit. When did you do that? And how was that received?
Yeah. So I came out to my family when I was 18 years old, and I came out because I had, at that point, I didn't know what transgender was growing up. There wasn't, YouTube and Google and all that kind of stuff growing up. It wasn't even a thing. It wasn't in media, wasn't nothing. It just, you knew about gays and the lesbians. And it's like, you either fit into one of those categories, or, or you're straight,
or you don't,
or you're a cisgender. I mean, and so, for me, I felt always like there was something that wasn't quite fitting. Like, I always felt like there was something off. I just didn't understand why. And I was Paul for, before I transitioned. I was Paul probably since second grade. I was just always known as Paul. And I was always a tomboy growing up, but, they thought that was a phase and all that kind of stuff, and it was, it wasn't until I finally, in university, finally discovered what transgender was. This light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, this makes so much sense. And I just never looked back from it. I was like, I knew this was who I was. There was no doubt about it. And at that moment, I had to, I met with a lot of people in the community just to get information and understand what it would take. And everywhere that I went, people would tell me, expect to lose everything. Expect to lose everyone. Expect to lose all your friends, all your family.
Are these the people that were also
in the community?
Trans? Okay.
They're also transgender. And they're like, expect that, we lost everything. We lost everyone. Everywhere down to like, you'll have to get a new doctor, all that kind of stuff. Right. So it was a lot for me to think about whether or not this was the price I was willing to pay. And for me, I realized in that moment that I to choose to not be myself like I had been for all these years was not living at all. You know, it was
Mhm.
either I choose to live or a life that I truly felt was worth living, because I wasn't going to spend one more moment pretending to be something I wasn't.
Let's stop there for
Yeah.
a second, because
Yeah.
that's really important what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was interviewing my friend Steve,
Mm-hmm.
ironically, he said almost word for word what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, explain to me what you mean by that. And he said what you just said. And what you're basically talking about, which is the piece that you and I were discussing before we got on the podcast around the suicide rates that
Mm-hmm.
are just astronomical within the
Mm-hmm.
community,
Mm-hmm.
upwards of 50% for the LGBTQIA community. And
Mm-hmm.
he said that to me. He said, you just don't understand that there's no point in being here again anymore,
Mm-hmm.
because you feel like you just completely don't fit in.
Yeah.
And I've also had another friend who told me that, she had thought to herself, if I were to die, maybe I would come back a girl, which is
Mm-hmm.
what I really am.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a pretty profound mindset in itself, that I think people don't understand, and I think people just pass by it. They just sweep by it because it's uncomfortable to
Mm-hmm.
to to talk about, right? It's
Yeah.
uncomfortable to think about people who are not living their true authentic selves, whether they are in the community or straight. Let's
Mm-hmm.
be honest, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are living in a prison. They're held captive,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way out other than for them to feel like there should be another place for them in another
Mm-hmm.
world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really genuinely goes on within the community and
Mm-hmm.
within the mindset, right? And so are you saying that you felt that way at one point?
Well, I remember when I was a child, I didn't know what transgender was. And I was
Mm-hmm.
bullied and I was
Sure.
called, like so many different things. And I, at a very, very young age, this was probably when I was about 12 years old. There was a point where I didn't feel life was worth living anymore,
Mm-hmm.
because I was living at my parents' house, right? Obviously, as a 12-year-old, I didn't have any control over how I could dress because I had no money. I'm 12. I couldn't express myself the way that I wanted to. I couldn't be addressed to the way that I wanted to. And everywhere that I go, people are telling me, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And you're like, I don't know what is wrong with me. I didn't want to do anything to, upset you. I just wanted to be myself. And why is it that I remember when I was in 8th grade, and there was this girl who I thought was my friend at the time, and she told me to go put a paper bag on my head and go die. And I remember sitting there being like, wow, because of the way that I am, because of the way that I dress, the way that I look, the way that I present myself to the world, just my being in the world,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it's not in their eyes normal, I have no inherent value in their eyes as a human being. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if that's the point, if I have no value, then what is my point in being here? And, as a child, you're thinking, okay, well, like, what are my options here? I don't have very many options. I'm not, I'm not self-sufficient. And so
Right.
I remember being at that point being like, this is just the prison that I get to live within. And I actually, at one point, had decided, okay, if this is what it takes for me to be accepted, I will give you exactly what you want. I'll grow out my hair. I'll wear the clothes. I'll play the part. But every single day I was so miserable, because it's this feeling, it's kind of like if someone were to call you a different name, right? If everywhere you
Mm-hmm.
went, people just kept calling you Bob for no reason because they
Yeah.
saw you as Bob, and you're like, that's not my name. And I remember every single time people would call me, by, she or her, or, by my previous name, I just wanted to go hide under a rock somewhere, because I felt like this gut wrenching feeling like this is not who I am. And I felt like my voice was suffocated because I couldn't
Yes.
express that this is not me. And that, I wanted to just be able to walk freely in the world, just being me. That's all I wanted. Growing up, I didn't want to be famous. I didn't want to be successful. I didn't want to be some rock star or anything like that. I just wanted to fit in. I want to be able to go to a restaurant, be able to be called my name, be able to have a meal without someone harassing me, be able to go to the washroom that I feel comfortable in, be able to be loved by someone that sees me for who I am, because I'm funny, because I'm intelligent, because I'm, generous and loving and all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I wanted as a kid.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted growing up. And so when I got to that point where I'm like, wow, I realized the reason why I've been feeling so out of place is because I'm in the wrong body, because I'm a transgender man. I'm like, at this point, the price for me to pay to continue living the way that I was far heavier than the price to pay to lose all my family, lose all my friends, lose everything that I ever had. Because that to me was, the price for freedom. I was willing to pay it. I was willing to pay the price to just be able to breathe, to be me in the world, to live.
I have to say something to you right now. Because I am, I told you I might cry. I am feeling so overwhelmed by your passion and how articulate you are in speaking your truth that it is so genuinely inspiring. I mean, honestly.
Thank you.
Honestly.
Thank you so much.
But here's the positive of all of this, because all of those things are just such painful things for me to hear from you. And I've been there, with my own son, and I know what you've been faced with, and I can only imagine how difficult it was, because I walked alongside my own son's pain for so many years. When we would go into stores, we actually got harassed in a store one time, a clothing store, and it was really, really awful, an awful experience. And I just became mama bear, right? Because you just get pissed. And I came after these two men that were in the store that were harassing us, and they had kind of targeted him. He was in a different aisle, and he was dressed he had makeup on, and he had he was dressed, he wasn't wearing like girl clothes. Well, he sort of was wearing girl clothes. I think he was probably like 9 or 10. And I don't even remember what he was wearing. I mean, I always just encouraged him to wear whatever, but he had makeup on. And I know that was the thing that would set them off. And they started talking about him really loudly. And I was in another aisle, and I heard it. And I came around the corner, and claws out, right? Came after these people. And then there was an altercation in the store. I'm not saying this was the right thing, Paul, but it happened, right? And so I actually remember we were checking out, and we were trying to get out of there. And my son was like behind me, and he was like, hey, Mom, what's going on? Like, I can tell you're upset, because he hadn't heard the exchange. And these men were saying stuff behind us, and my son just turned around and he looked at him, and he goes, Mom, what's going on? And I could tell the look on his face. I was like, I'm going to have to tell him. And this man behind me, these men were two people behind me. This man that was right behind me was with his family, and he noticed what was going on. And he said, I'm going to walk you to the car. And I said, that would really be great. And he literally walked us out, and then we got in the car, and then he looked at me and he said, I'm sorry, I don't know how to respond, if this is your son or your daughter. And I said, this is my son. And he said, okay. He said, well, I just wanted to make sure you were safe. I'm sorry, I heard what happened in the store. And I have to tell you, like, that some of the things that you were just describing came up for me, because that was such an awful moment. Because Cole, when we got in the car, Cole said to me, Mom, I just want to be who I am. Why can't I just be who I am? Why can't I just wear makeup without somebody commenting? It's no one's business.
Mhm.
And it just fires me up because
Mhm.
I feel your pain and every other person that is in this community's pain, and their mother's pain and their
Mhm.
father's pain,
Mhm.
and also really our the uneducation that comes with it, not knowing how to support
Mhm.
your loved one, right?
Mhm.
And so it came up for me as you were talking, and it was really powerful, and I just wanted you to know that it was such a beautiful thing that you just said, because I could see you. You know, the listeners can't see you, but I can see you, just your mannerism changes when you talk about it, because it is so powerful for you and still resonates with you, that everything about you changed.
Mhm.
And you get very passionate about it. I can see why you're very good at your job. You're a huge, I could see you being just a huge motivator.
Thank you. You know, I think, first of all, I want to acknowledge you for what you did for your son,
Oh, thank you.
because despite what happened in the store, what you did there is very important, because what it let him know, even at such a young age, is that I got your back. Mom's got your back. And I think often the people that are around us,
Hmm.
regardless of if you're, if you're LGBTQ, you know, IA at all,
Right.
regardless, as a child,
Yeah.
whenever, as a child, you see that no matter what, that there are people, mom, dad, uncle, aunts, cousin, whatever, brother, sister, that take a stand for you in that moment, is like a brick to put up to say, I'm worthy. It's
Mm.
like this foundation that they're building that gives them the courage that, you know what, not everyone may accept me, not everyone may love me, but the people closest to me will always have my back. And to know that this is a safe space for me to be me. And I think that's so important, that it starts in the home, because we talked about suicide rates. We talked and in the LGBT community, especially with transgender people, there's kids, especially, there's a lot of homelessness. It's a lot of
Yeah.
poverty. And it's because there are parents out there that do not understand. And from the lack of understanding, as well as from their own preconceived judgments of their children, um, they cast them out
Yeah.
before they can take the time to understand. And the household plays such an integral part of that child's future, because honestly, I would not be where I am if my parents kicked me out of the house. Like, I feel very blessed and grateful that even though they didn't understand, they allowed me to stay. They still, like, paid for my meals, and they allowed me to, they supported me even though they didn't understand. They
Hmm.
may not have fully outwardly accepted it, because I know you asked the question earlier, never really got around to it, around like how my parents reacted to it. When I first came
Yeah.
out, my parents were not supportive. My mom was very, very unsupportive of it.
Sure.
And she I think at that point had come to kind of accept me as a lesbian, but to be like, I'm transgender and I'm transitioning, was like a whole other ballpark she was not
She was
expecting.
like, wait, I thought you were lesbian. I just got used to that.
Yeah, right. And for me, it's like, I get that, how difficult it is, because it truly is like mourning a child that you had given birth
Hmm.
to, and you had hopes and aspirations for, and all of a sudden it's like your child is still here, but then is taking on a whole new identity. And now, for my mom and my parents, I understand now that there is this grieving that happens around, almost like the death of their daughter and the birth of a son that they're just getting to get to know. And even though they did not accept it at first, I really appreciated how they were willing to seek resources to better understand. We had a psychologist, because my parents spoke Cantonese, so I couldn't really express
Mm.
myself the way that I wanted to them, especially with the lingo and everything. So we had a psychologist that we went to that was really, they felt like it was for counseling me, but I was like, no, you're more of a communication to explain to
Yeah.
my parents
Would you
about why
say
I am.
would you say that's a really good idea? It sounds like it would be a great thing to have
Yeah.
if your family's open to it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think because that they're able to explain it in more I guess like eloquent terms than I could at the
Yes.
time, when I'm just like, I don't really like, I just know this is who I am, but I can't explain the technical parts of why and all that kind of stuff, the
Yeah.
psychology behind it.
So you
I
had,
just know this is me.
was it someone that specializes in trans? Did you
No,
find?
actually not whatsoever. It was
Oh,
actually a
interesting.
psychologist who had we had worked with in Hong Kong, kind of like a whole separate story. My sister had anorexia when she was 12 years old. And so we
Mm,
had a psychologist that we were working with when my sister was going through that. And so we had a relationship established. And so he, knew sort of enough about that to be able to at least like communicate and be able to have a place for my parents to really go to and express whatever's coming up for them, which I think is really healthy.
mm-hmm.
And the funny thing though is that when I did start to transition, because I'm like, I'm not waiting any longer, like I'm going to get going here, like, and
Yeah.
he actually wanted to stop me from doing that. He's like, you can wait 5 years and then you can transition. I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. I'm not waiting 5 years for this. I'm
Why would he
transitioning
want you?
now.
Yeah. Why would he want you to do that? I'm just
Well,
curious.
because in Hong Kong, uh, the development around understanding transgender people, and also like just the medical community around it, is much
Mm-hmm.
more limited than
Okay.
in North America, in
Oh,
US and Canada. So here there's like systems, in which that you go through. There's, psychiatrists, there are endocrinologists, there are doctors that specialize in this.
right.
That is not the case. It's still very taboo in Hong Kong. There's no support for this, really. It's very
Okay.
much still like, not talked about. So
Yes.
in Hong Kong, they're still way behind. So they're like, our process here is that you go through a process of, 5 years just to kind of, dress and present yourself as male or female, whoever, whoever the gender you're transitioning to. And then you can start going down that process. It's
And you're
much
like, no,
slower. I'm like,
no.
no. And so what I appreciated was that even though my parents they didn't necessarily understand, and they didn't necessarily agree, they just honestly at the end of the day wanted me to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, are you sure? Because this is not reversible,
Yeah.
not easily, not really reversible, And so they just really at the end of the day cared enough about me. They love me enough to be like, we just really, really want to make sure this is the right decision for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I have never been more sure in my life. And they're like, okay, if you're sure, and if you're going to do this anyways,
Yeah.
you might as well do it now, kind of
And
thing.
you were
And
how
so
old then? You were 18 then
I was 18 when I came out. I was 19 when I started
when you
like
started doing.
formally like medically transitioning.
Right. And so and let's explain that a little bit to the
Yeah.
viewers as far as, or the listeners, as far
Mm-hmm.
as the transitioning. So
Mm-hmm.
you then started taking
Hormones. Yeah.
hormones and all of
Yeah.
that to go
Mm-hmm.
through, okay, the
Mm-hmm.
testosterone, all of that stuff, right?
Right. Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So like went through like
And that's a process.
yeah, legal name change, like,
Mm-hmm.
and first of all, like there's a lot of misconception about the process of going through a transition. People are like, oh, you
Yes.
wake up one day, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I'm, the opposite sex. And then they feel like they can just, they think that we can just transition like that. It's not like that. There is a
No.
whole process in place where I had to go to multiple psychiatrists. They have to do a whole psychological assessment. You have to go through a phase of actually presenting and living as the gender that, you feel that you are. And you
Okay.
have to go out in society and be like, is this really for me? And they have to go through, like stringent assessments. And then after that, it's a process to get you to an endocrinologist once they have assessed that you are mentally sound. Cause there's a lot of different factors to it. If you have, history of drug abuse, or, like some suicide, or, like any kind of challenges around mental health, the process can look different. So they
Right.
very much are, they ensure that when you do make this transition, it's the right one for you.
You're
Because
in a healthy space.
right, exactly.
Right.
So, once you go through that process, then you go to an endocrinologist, and then they then assess you and prescribe, like hormones. And then after that, you get assessed once again. And there's, like multiple rounds of different surgeries that you go
Mm-hmm.
through, in order to, like go through the whole entire process. So it's not like it's difficult. Like I went through 3 straight years of surgeries, and it's difficult. It's physically difficult, to a point where one of my surgeries went wrong. I almost died from the surgery. I
Oh my
actually,
God.
there was actually a time, it was before actually, right before I met my wife, I went in for a surgery that like wasn't, it didn't seem like it was going to be a big surgery. It was a hysterectomy,
Yeah.
and they went in and they did it. It was fine. I went home, and I immediately started like my whole entire like I started getting fevers, chills,
Oh
like
no.
and then my whole body functions just went out the window. I was puking. I was, things were coming out of everywhere. And it was a whole week where I was just not getting better. And it wasn't until I went to the ER multiple times, couldn't figure it out. It wasn't until I literally got to a point where I puked my guts out. There was literally nothing left in me, and I was like, I need to go to I don't care what it is, that like I need to go to the hospital because there's something wrong. And I literally remember that moment where I was lying in my bed, and it was almost like a highlight reel playing in my head of everything that my life had been up until that point, because
Oh
I could
no.
literally feel my body shutting down. And I remember there
Wow.
was a voice in my head that said, it is not your time to go yet. There is still much more for you to do here. And I went to the
Wow.
hospital. They immediately took me in. They did a scan. The doctor came in, like the next morning, because I went in pretty late, and said, we have to go into surgery right now. You have massive internal bleeding, and that your organs are drowning right now. So we need to go into surgery right away to
What the
rectify
heck
this. So
happened with the surgery? We don't know.
yeah, basically what happened was that I think there was like something that went wrong in terms of like as they were the
As they
stitching or
were
whatever,
stitching. Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was. And there was internal bleeding. And so
Oh,
I went in, I
Paul.
had like
Wow.
immediate surgery, and literally I dropped like 10 pounds overnight. And I had tubes stuck everywhere, and like I was out of school. I had to learn to walk again. Like I couldn't even walk from here to like 3 feet without that taking like, that took me like half an hour. And so the price to pay is a very heavy price,
Yeah. You
because
have to
there
be
are risks.
invested.
Yes. And so for people to think that this is just like a fad or something fun to do, or something that like, oh, like it's the thing, everyone wants to be transgender. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. There is a very heavy price to pay, where the price could be my life. Because the nurse literally told me, you're lucky that you got here in the time that you did. If you waited 24 hours later, you would have died. And so
Wow.
I
This is
literally almost
remarkable.
died. Yeah.
I mean, this is a big part of your story.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably why you have the mindset that you have around not embracing that victim
Mm-hmm.
status. And you just are such a positive light. It's because of what just happened, or what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you experience something like that, I mean, all the things that you've experienced have led to this moment. But that's a
Mm-hmm.
big deal.
Yeah. It was a big wake up call. It really was. It's like you have a second lease at life. And often we can be
Remarkable.
victims of our circumstances, say, because I am this way, I am not able to do this. But then I from that moment on, I told myself, there is nothing that will stop me from
Mm-hmm.
having the life that I want. There is nothing that can put a box around me to say that I can't do this because I am transgender. I am just as good. If not, I can stand shoulder to shoulder with the best. Not
Absolutely.
because, and not because I'm like cocky about it or anything like that. I'm just saying I get to stand shoulder to shoulder. And this is not something that sets me back. And it shouldn't be something that sets me back. And it was literally after that, it took me out of school that entire semester. I was so bummed out, and I had to, spend the whole time recovering for like the next 4 months. And after that, my viewpoint on life had changed. It's like, this whole, it was a switch went off, and I met my wife after that.
And that's when it happened, and you met her.
Yeah.
Wow. I know my friend who is also trans male
Mm.
told me that when he got his first dose of testosterone
Mm-hmm.
after his hysterectomy and everything, that it was like, he said it was the first time where I was like, this is how I'm supposed to be feeling.
Mm.
It was a normalcy that just kicked in. And this is the piece that really kind of spurred me to do this show, and to have all these great stories on here, because we're still living in a society where people do not understand what what you just went through. They don't get it. They don't want to get it. They don't want to understand the terminology, learn the terminology. They think that trans people are, a spectacle, sex workers, because that's how all of that's been objectified in the media and on film over the years. And so there's just this very strange vibe that goes on when, especially in certain generations, when you're talking to someone about being trans. And I think we're getting better. I mean, would you agree? It's getting better.
Absolutely. It is. Yeah.
It's getting better, but we still have such a long way to go.
Yeah.
And I think that what's important that I want to make sure that we talk about is, what are the things from your opinion, like maybe the things that your parents did well in terms of how they accepted you. I mean, you talked a little bit about it, things that maybe could have gone, maybe would have helped you a little bit better had they done X, Y, Z, right? So just kind of give us an idea of, like, if a parent is listening right now and they are pretty sure that their child is within the LGBTQIA community or specifically trans, what can they do to embrace that, to educate themselves? I mean, I'm a huge fan of PFLAG. Do you know about that organization?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just joined, and I might open a chapter here in Portland.
That's amazing.
I know.
Amazing.
I'm just going to throw one more thing on my list. But they did talk a little bit about, I have another podcast where I talk about this, but I want to know from your perspective, what do you think are some things that could be done or not done to help?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for each of us, and here's the thing, is that underneath our skin color, our gender identity, sexual orientation, what makes us look different from each other, at the very core of it, every human being just wants to be loved and accepted. Everyone just wants to be loved and accepted at the very, very core. And the thing that makes the biggest difference, especially for those that are in the community, is the outward love and acceptance from the people closest to them. And there is such a power in, like what you did for your son in the grocery store. There's such a power to that, because what I realized, and honestly, I've spent my whole life chasing validation. And that was a big part of my journey, of always feeling like I needed something to validate that I was, enough. I was enough of a man. I was enough of a person. I was, worthy, all these different things. And what I realized at the core of it is that actually it's impossible to have everybody's validation and everybody's acceptance. You can be Beyonce. There's still going to be haters.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what
but
I realized,
would like to be Beyonce.
Yes, absolutely. I think all of us would love to have the life of Beyonce. I think what is what a child is really seeking is that not everyone has to agree and accept who they are, but to have the voice of their mother, their father, be like, you know what? I don't care what you think. This is my child and I love them for who they are, speaks volumes. Because you can accept your child within your house, but if you cannot accept them outwardly and defend them in public, there's still some work to be done. Because for me, I remember that even though my parents accepted me within our four walls of our house and like within family and friends that did know, when we stepped outside the home, I felt that there was this shame.
Yes.
And I don't blame them. I understand what it was going through. And at the same time, I felt the shame. I didn't even realize the weight of the shame that I then took on as a subconscious signal that, like I bring embarrassment to my family. I bring shame to my family. There's something wrong with me. Even though they love me, there's still something wrong with me, that they are not proud enough of me to be able to, express, their love for me in public, to express their acceptance of me in public, and to acknowledge who I am in public. And so even just starting there that part is huge. I think the other part as well is that I think it's okay to not understand. It is completely okay. We don't expect everyone to be, an expert. It's just like, no one prepared you to be a mom. No one prepared your dads to be a dad. You just kind of figure it out as you go.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Yep.
think the part that is most important is just the willingness to understand, the willingness to empathize. I think empathy is so important in the society we live in right now. We are all so committed to being right, and so committed to our ego about, I have to look good and I have to be a certain way. And you have this like a picture of what your life is supposed to be like and your kid's life is supposed to be like, and what that is completely shattered because they're gay or lesbian or transgender. All of a sudden, it's, there's this judgment brought upon your children. And at that point, this is hard, this is the truth, but it's a bit bold. It's about you at that point.
Yeah.
And I think as a parent, this
that.
child is looking up to you, that you are the very first protector of their life. Very
Mm-hmm.
first, you're the very first to hold them, very first to love them. And that is all they want from you. They don't want your money. They don't want, materialistic things. At the very core, every child just wants the love of their parent. And even if the whole world does not love and accept them, at least they have you. And that speaks volumes, and that makes all the difference for them to have the confidence and the courage to be able to go out there and be themselves.
Yeah. And I think what you said is just so beautiful. And it just sums all of that up so clearly on, just the path that I think you've been on, where I've met other friends who are trans, who maybe didn't have as good of a transition because they didn't have the love, like the people who said to you, get ready to lose everything. Right? Because it's not going to matter. But you know what, if you have to lose everything so that you can be who you are and be authentic, that's okay too. Right?
Yeah. And here's the thing too, is that each of us has the power to create the life that we want, which means that even if they don't accept you in this moment, you can stand in that vision that you have with the relationship that you want to have with your family, with your friends, whoever it is. If they are that important to you, where you're like, this is truly what I want to see, and that through you and by how you show up and your relentlessness to be like, you know what, I know you don't love me and don't accept me in this moment. I am still 100% committed to loving you because you're my mom, because you're my dad, because you're my sister. And I will still continue to show up. I will continue to be here, and I will continue to be me and continue loving you. And through that, when you have the power to literally shift them, it may take, for my family, it took 5 years. It took 5 years for my parents, the first time they acknowledged me was at my sister's funeral. And my little sister passed away.
Oh my gosh,
that was
I'm so sorry to hear that.
First time that thank you. And that was the first time that I was acknowledged in public as being their son, as being my sister's brother. And it was in the most unwanted of circumstances. And at the same time, it was 5 years in the making.
Well, it was probably a moment for your parents of like, they just lost a child.
Yeah.
And they don't want to lose another one, right?
Yeah.
So it was probably a really profound moment. I mean, of course, being a mom, always looking out for the mommies, and the mommies and the dads, because I just know how difficult, it is to go through this journey and not have anybody to talk to, not to have friends. I mean, I didn't have any friends. When I realized my son was gay, we didn't have any friends that had gay sons. We just didn't. In fact, at that point in time, I probably had 2 friends in my entire life that were gay. And now I have a whole group of, a group of friends within the LGBTQ community, because I'm so much more aware and educated about it, Gosh, I'm so sorry to hear about your sister. And do you have any other brothers and sisters?
Thank you. No, I just had one little sister.
Yeah. And did your sister know about she was involved in the transition, or did she?
Yes. Yeah. She totally knew about it. She was very supportive of it. She's like, oh yeah, I always wanted a brother. And so it's like, so it was great, with my sister. And, if anything, it's just one of those moments, like you said, that really brought to light how how fragile life really is,
I think
and
that's it.
how, often we hold on to things that really don't matter that much. And it takes moments like that when it really becomes real. That's like, oh my gosh, like life is right now. And this is all that there is.
Well, and listen to this. I posted this on social media about a week ago that I found, and I thought this was pretty interesting.
Mm,
It was a 2018 report from the Human Rights Campaign shows that 78% of LGBTQIA youth are not out at home, who are not
mm,
out at home, sorry, hear their families make negative comments about the LGBTQIA people. So our kids are listening,
mm,
right? And we have to create a safe space. I mean,
yeah.
they know who they are, just
Mm,
like you did, well before any of us do,
mm,
right? And so we
mm,
have to be aware and awake on what we're
mm,
saying in front of our children.
mm, yeah.
And I had somebody say to me the other day, gosh, I'm trying to remember who the heck it was. Someone I just had met in passing, and we were talking about addiction. My son is in
Mm,
recovery from heroin and meth, which is, has been in a journey in its own, and is
mm,
also, has some mental health issues, and is gay, a gay
mm,
26-year-old. And there was a weird comment to me made, like, um, almost as if like the addiction wasn't as big of a deal, or it was a secondary thing to being gay. Like, oh gosh, how do
mm,
you deal with how do you deal with your son being gay? That must be so hard. I'm
mm,
just like, what?
mm,
No, the fact that he's almost died and he's been addicted to heroin since he was 14 years old,
mm.
which is,
Wow.
by the way, when his brain, really stopped,
Mm,
progressing. So he
yeah.
still kind of is at that age,
Mm,
which I don't know if many people know that about heroin, but that's a fact.
wow.
But that was a very strange comment. And,
Mm,
in the past, I would just kind of like brush over it, or I wouldn't say
mm,
anything, or somebody would say something like, oh gosh, what's it like to have a gay son, or blah, blah, blah. And now I'm pissed. Now I get fired up
mm,
because I just want people to understand that it's just like what you said. It can be anyone, it can be the person in the cubicle next to you that's
mm,
going through this tough time of deciding to come out or not, or
mm,
to transition, right?
mm,
It's just crazy to me that people still think that way. So, I mean, that's kind of why I want to do this. I want to keep talking
yeah.
about this stuff. I feel like we have so much more to talk about too.
Oh, I feel like we could go on for hours and hours. And, like one thing I just wanted to, note really quick, as you were saying, how sometimes it could be the guy next to you in the cubicle. I
Yeah.
think often the media likes to portray LGBTQ people, the community, as this like circus freak show. It's like,
Yes.
oh, like you're everyone's a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, we are just, we are the guy or the girl that's standing behind you in line at Starbucks.
Yeah.
We may be in the cubicle next to you at work. We may be, standing in line to pay our groceries in front of you. We are in a couple seats down at the movie theater from you. We are living amongst you, and we're really not that different from you. Like, you prick me, I bleed the same as you. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, we're not looking to go out there and create a spectacle. A lot of us just want to live. That was the very core purpose, is we just want to be able to have the freedom to just live,
Mm-hmm.
and the freedom to be, and just
Yeah.
be able to have the same rights as everybody else to
Mm-hmm.
live a free, joyful, and abundant life. Like that's it. And you know, at the very core of it, I think it's when it's an idea, or when it's just like a concept, like being gay or transgender, it's very easy to displace the humanity next to it, because you're just talking about the concept of like how it's this and how it's that. But when you're able to know that, oh my gosh, like my coworker is transgender, and he is an amazing person, and he actually isn't that different from anybody else, and he's an amazing guy, and all these different things, and like I kind of forget about it. you know, or, oh, my coworker is gay, you know, like, or whatever, my friend's gay. When you know someone and when you place a face and a name to what you're talking about, all of a sudden there is this humanity next to it that, you know what, all of us just want to be loved and accepted. And that at the end of the day, that we're really not that different from you. And because like we are all the same, I think everyone gets to have the same opportunity to be able to express and be and do whatever it is in the world. Because guess what? The more we're able to be authentically ourselves, the better our world becomes, the more creative it is,
Yes.
the more innovative it is, the more free it is, and that everyone is just able to live their best life. But right now it's because we constantly feel like there's this invisible prison around us because of the opinions of others that we don't even, like, those that are expressing those opinions don't even realize like the damaging effects of it, that literally by their words is holding someone back from expressing who they truly are.
Boy, I just love that. And also, please don't ask about people's private parts.
Yes.
That really, you know, I I had to throw that in.
Yes.
Because it's like what you said earlier when we were talking, like, you wouldn't ask me about my private parts.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so let's not objectify that, right? I mean, it's a process of an emotional and physical transition, and spiritual, right? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on, right, within the transition.
Yeah.
And that's really all you need to know.
Yeah. And why does it matter?
Why does it matter?
Why does it matter? You know, it's like, when would that ever come up in like you said, a conversation between two cisgendered people? Like, you're not all of a sudden going to be like, well, let me ask you some questions about your private parts. Like you said, like, what does that have to do with anything? And why does that matter to you? And also, just because I'm different doesn't mean that that I'm a spectacle that is allowing permission for everyone to all of a sudden be able to like have a microscope on my life and ask these types of questions. Like, if you wouldn't want someone to ask a question like that to you, then probably shouldn't be asking it to anyone else.
Exactly. Well, and you know, I mean, I want to have you back because
I'd love to be back.
There's so many more things to talk about. I mean, we didn't really even touch on mental health stuff and other things that I think we definitely should talk about. I'd love to, you know, if you're open and willing, I'd love to hear about your sister. You know, I think that is probably a really important story. You know, and also we need to just kind of close and talk a little bit about your business and what you do, and that you are building your business. Actually, you've already built it, but we're building it even more. And we want to get the word out, because can you imagine, if you're listening to this right now, can you imagine if you are I'm a CEO of a staffing company right now, and if I was a CEO of a big firm or even a small firm, and I had a whole bunch of leaders under me, and I had a bunch of leaders that were having, like, some people were managing one way and some were managing another way. And there was all this dissension. There was no consistency across the board in leadership. Can you imagine if you hire Paul to come in, not knowing, because I don't know because this is new for you, so you haven't really disclosed this yet in your work, but you bring him in for all the things that you just heard: his conviction, his authenticity, his passion for this particular topic. Can you imagine if he comes in and puts together this program for you and your leaders, what's going to happen? And then you find out that he's a trans male. I don't even know. I feel like it is you are doing such beautiful work, such important work. But this, and your bio, I'm going to have all your stuff on the podcast. Your bio picture is adorable. I love it. Such a great picture of you, and just everything that you are about. And then on top of it, you have this beautiful story. It's so amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit before, because I got really excited about your business, and I want you to talk about it before we close.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, by the way. I'm blushing, and I just really, really appreciate, your support and your acknowledgement. Means so much coming from someone so amazing.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay. Keep
and
going.
yeah, so, at the core of what I do is I'm an authentic leadership coach. And for me, my work is really to empower and inspire leaders to be able to be fully, unapologetically, authentically themselves and be able to really own their truth, really own their power. And by doing so, be able to create connection, not only with themselves, but be able to create connection with their team, with their clients, with their business, and ultimately their vision, so that they can bring it to life and really transform the world. And so for me, what I do is I work with leaders, from a corporate environment, or, just a smaller business environment, where I go in and I work with leaders to really be able to, break open this, their true authenticity. And I think that's even more important, I think, in the world that we're in right now, where, like, physical connection is not something that we have necessarily the privilege of access to right now. That our authenticity transcends screens, it transcends borders, it transcends any kind of barrier, because when you're fully able to just be you, be able to access your vulnerability, be able to access your voice, be able to have the strength and the courage to fully be able to be you, people build this automatic trust with you. They trust you, they connect with you, they see you, and they want to get to know you. They want to do business with you. They want to work with you. They want to work for you. And I think there is such a power to that, because the more authentic we are as people, as a humanity, the more we're able to just be ourselves, the more we're able to, first of all, be able to love ourselves, and in turn be able to love others. And when we're able to see the gifts that we are and be able to embrace everything that we truly stand for, that's when we're able to reflect that into the world. And you're able to unlock just like human potential on your team, in your family, everywhere around you. And that makes for, a bigger, a better, and a more transformed world.
Sign me up. You are so inspiring. I don't even know. I can't, I feel like this is going to be
Thank
a
you.
really important friendship.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
do.
I believe so as well.
I do. I'm really jiving with you. I am. I just feel like we are on the same path, and it's just so exciting to have you you were just brought to me in this beautiful, for this beautiful purpose. But I want to help you as much as I can with your business, because
Thank you.
not for any other reason other than the fact that I think that you are just a spectacular human being. I really do. I really, really do.
Thank you
So,
so much. That means a ton coming from someone, like I said, that is, as amazing as you, and the
oh
work
my
that you've
gosh,
done, and
we're just,
the
there's
work
a
that
love
you're
fest
doing.
going on.
It is a mutual, it's a mutual respect.
It's a love fest. Well,
Yeah.
let's let everybody know about your website. Go ahead and spell that.
Yeah, so it's leadership.com. So it's spelled connection, like my last name, Can. So KANNECTION, leadership.com.
Yep.
And you can reach me at, I think you'll have my email as well, paul.can@connectionleadership.com. And for all of your listeners as well, I think, especially right now, I definitely want to give back to the community, or anyone that this would really serve, to jump on a call with me. I'd be happy to offer a free 1-hour session to really dive into the power of you, to really dive into what truly holds your power, who you truly are, and to really be able to unleash that into the world, so that you can fully live your purpose and your vision.
Oh my gosh, this is so great. I'm excited for you. And I'm going to have all that information on the podcast when we go live. And Paul, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and being so vulnerable and so open. And thank you for validating mine as well. And for my little tear fest, it felt really good to talk about it. And thank you. I appreciated you acknowledging that. So, we'll, until we meet again, let's have more of
Absolutely.
these.
Yes, I agree. I'm excited. I'm excited for this to come out. Excited for what you're creating. And yeah, I would love to continue the conversation. And thank you for doing what you're doing, because I think it's very important work. I think it is so needed. And you are going to be impacting hundreds of thousands, millions of lives out there that are just waiting for your platform to come out to let them know that their life is truly a life worth living.
Oh, thanks, Paul. That's a perfect place to end it. I appreciate it. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Yeah, no
Bye bye.
problem. See ya. Bye.